When I was in college, I was studying French, and I loved everything about it. My school had a study abroad program, and my French teacher assured me that if I lived there, I would be fluent within a few weeks, and I would be able to take courses in French as well as English, as well as just live in France. I had loved France and all things French since I was a little girl, and we had a French exchange student stay at our house with our family in the 5th grade. I dreamed of going to Paris and speaking French fluently and traveling the coast and eating the cuisine and just generally being fabulous and glamorous. The road not taken can be a fun, escapist fantasy. It can also be a deeper temptation to leave the here and now for some dream place. Now, escapism has its uses and its place. It alleviates the pressure of now, and it can give our minds play and relief. But when we use the fun of escapism and we travel more deeply into the temptation of not here, not now, moving from dreaming to something more like wishing or longing, it can undermine our well-being. When we venture into the land of my life would be better if, we move away from the love and the beauty of the present and into a fantasy land. I will admit to you that I have skated on this slope with my French dream a bit. Sometimes I just imagine drinking Chardonnay on the Riviera, writing Hemingway-esque but feminist novels, along the coastline with the smell of the sea spray in the air, and that is just good, clean fun. But when I go off into devaluing my life as it is now, wishing for my sea spray novelist life, in which I would obviously have not a care in the world, when I do that, I undermine my appreciation for the beauty and the love that I have built here and now. Longing for a fantasy unmoors me from reality, and I miss the beauty and the blessing of this moment with you. Our view of Lake Michigan, the smell of our earth, the crash of our waves against the breakwater. Longing for a fantasy forgets the spiritual truth as well in the parable that Fiona told this morning in our story for all ages. We don't know the ultimate outcome of our decisions. Something that I categorize as good right now might have extremely unintended consequences later. My fantasy French life gets to be fabulous and sophisticated because I'm imagining it. It doesn't contain real-world realities like accidents or broken relationships or missing years of my loved ones' lives because I'm overseas. The fantasy never contains all the rivulets of consequence that real life does. It misses the twists and turns of, we found 6 wild new horses, good, but now my son has broken his leg trying to break one in, bad. But now he doesn't have to go to war, good. Maybe yes, maybe no, because life keeps unfolding. Life is a mix. It is always and forever joy and woe woven fine, love and loss braided together like the temporal twins that they are. When we wander away from here and now, there is an even deeper danger: regret. Jewish Muslim academic and Sufi sheikh Baba Ibrahim Farajage warned that regret is spiritual poison. Regret is spiritual poison. He cautioned against ever entertaining it because when you take that poison, it is corrosive to the soul. In my own life, I've had to wrestle away from that acidic soul poison of regret, and it felt like trying to dig out a pain that wanted to burrow inside of me. It took time and attention and deliberate intervention whenever my thoughts started barreling down the neural pathways of regret, one new pain tumbling after another. Loss is inevitable. Loss is part of human life. Sometimes a love interest isn't returned. Sometimes we have accidents, serious ones. Sometimes we miss the boat or the plane or the opportunity. We lose the job or the house or the family member. Attachment can be a terribly painful thing when you lose what you love. In a world in which temporality is the law, we will never be rid of loss. And the pain that goes along with loss is simply evidence that we have been willing to love in a world of constant change. Sometimes there can be a lesson in the process of loss. We might learn that we don't want to let fear to cause us to miss an opportunity, or we might learn that in the future we'll work harder to stop anger from causing harm to a relationship, or we might learn to make financial decisions that provide a more stable ground. When loss is connected to our own choices, there's a reflection process that happens. How did my choices connect with this loss? And that reflection process can help us learn, it can help us grow. As we keep living, we might learn to choose to take risks in order to open our hearts to love, or we might choose to practice self-regulation when we're triggered, or we might learn new behaviors that create more stability in our lives. We can learn from the twists and turns, the change that is inevitable in human life by observing action and consequence, and then shape our own behavior to help collaborate with inevitable change and the force of love to live the lives that we most want to live. And that kind of reflection can be helpful learning. But regret is something different. Regret is more than loss. It's more than learning a lesson and changing our behavior. Regret is thoughts tumbling down a slide of what if into a pool of should have. Oh, I should have. Regret moves us from processing and learning the role of our decisions and into self-harm. Regret is spiritual poison. My dear ones, don't eat poison. We human beings, we are messy. We are mistake-making creatures. It is baked in to being human that we will make mistakes. It's normal, and unfortunately, it's one of the ways we learn most effectively. Mistakes can be useful as guideposts that turn our way on the path. I don't want to do that. I don't want to live that way. I don't want to behave that way. And some of those mistakes will have painful consequences. Let yourself grieve. Be with the pain, grieve the loss, learn the lesson. But the spiritual practice is letting it end there, not entertaining regret. When we notice that our mind is switching from lesson learning and reflection and into beating ourselves up, it's time to engage the spiritual muscles of intervention. It's time to redirect our thoughts, intentionally intervening in the tumble towards love for ourselves, love for our own humanity, and acceptance of the reality that all of us are human. All of us are going to make mistakes. Some of them will be bad. And yet, that's part of the process of being human. And as a human, you neither get to be perfect, I'm sorry, or all-powerful. You don't get to be all-powerful because I want you to know that regret, it is also a fantasy. When you imagine how things would be if you had made a different decision, you're fantasizing. You don't know the ultimate outcome. There are 1,000 different factors in how things happened. And those factors include your decision, but they also include other people's decisions. They also include things like the weather, systems of oppression, huge forces that are beyond all of our control. We see an outcome, but the reality is the story is still unfolding, and we are just one little part of that story, one decision-making factor. And so we need to not create an idol of our own decisions, that we are so all-powerful that one decision would have fundamentally changed the outcome. So I invite you, dear ones, to engage in a spiritual practice of forgiveness for yourself. Once you have learned the lesson from the mistake, let it go. The thing is done. You have grown from it, you have learned from it, you have apologized if you needed to do that, and now you get to allow yourself to be human and let it go. That is what the holy does, too. God, if you want to call it that, or the universe, if you want to call it that, or love, if you want to call it that. Love keeps growing with us. The larger love that holds all that is grows with humanity and the earth and the creatures in it as we learn and we grow. And all the regrets, all the losses, all the pain, all the suffering, they can keep leading us forward towards what we ultimately long for, towards love and the beautiful becoming of this moment right here, right now. And this is not to say everything happens for a reason. No. That is bad theology, and it can be salt in the wound of suffering. You did not get cancer for a reason. That accident didn't happen to bring you to your lost love. You didn't lose your dog because God has a plan. No. But love, the holy, what is good in me and what is good in you and all of what is good in the world can take all of that shit and make fertilizer out of it. Love and God and the universe, or whatever you want to call it, those forces that are larger than all of this, none of those forces are orchestrating pain to teach anyone a lesson or for any ultimate benefit. Love doesn't want to teach you a lesson, but you can choose to learn a lesson from a mistake and take the ruins of your losses and build your new life on top of them, using the old bricks as new bones. This is the theology of shaping. Shaping in partnership with change what is holy, choosing to mix love into the mortar and then build the life of your dreams from all that you have learned. Our lives are as paved by our no's as they are by our yeses, not because everything happens for a reason, but because we build reason out of what happens. We learn from the twists and the turns of life to shape the unfolding and inevitable changes towards more love, towards deepening faith and hope, towards our values of justice and care and community. In September of my sophomore year of college in New York City, there was a terrorist attack on our city. And in October of that year, the US government declared war on Afghanistan. 2 years following, they declared war on Iraq. Members of the Bush administration had been advocating for war with Iraq long before September 11th of 2001. They had written about needing dramatic funding increases to maintain US military power in the Persian Gulf and globally, a transformation of force which they wrote would have to happen slowly unless there was a catastrophic and catalyzing event, something like a new Pearl Harbor. After September 11th, 2001, those of us living in New York watched as those plans for US military dominance were carried out by the Bush administration, step by step. Incidentally, the think tank that published those plans, the Project for a New American Century, had deep ties to the Heritage Foundation, which has written a new project, Project 2025, that plans to restrict access to reproductive health care and enable discrimination by race and gender and sexuality and accelerate pollution and climate change. Just a side note. After war was declared in my sophomore year, I got involved in anti-war organizing at my school. We were part of a much larger movement in New York City that decried war being declared in our name. It was my first time being part of a movement, and my heart swelled with the banners and the puppets and the children with signs about the sanctity of life. I remember clearly the day I traveled on a packed subway car to an East Side stop that was closest to the first big protest, and it was so packed that we could hardly get off the car and onto the platform. And when we finally heaved our way up the stair by thousands, shoulder to shoulder with other New Yorkers saying no to war, when we arrived at the street, it was so full of people that cars had stopped in the middle of driving down the street, and their drivers just abandoned them there. They were like, never mind, this car is never moving again. I will leave it here. That was the largest mass demonstration in the history of the world at that time. Sophomore year was also the year that we had to decide whether or not to sign up for a semester abroad. I could go to France the following year and begin my glamorous novel-writing seaside life. Change my brain structure by adding a second language, change my understanding of the world by adding another culture. But in that decision-making moment, I knew that my call was in New York, and my work was at home in the anti-war movement, and my feet were needed most on the ground of the most powerful and deadly military in the world, a military that was thirsty to control the globe. That calling home has been a continuous spiral since then of deepening into home, deepening into calling. I've gone deeper and deeper into my duty as an American to take responsibility for the actions of my government, both here and abroad, and deeper into my conviction that I have to use my own power here and now to protest the use of force, violence, in solving problems, whether those problems are in Missouri or Palestine or the streets of Milwaukee. Human life is sacred, and no amount of rage or retaliation or state justification gives any of us the right to take it. And that has become increasingly clear to me, as has my call to go deeper and further into the root of home and here, where I have both the most agency and the most responsibility. My choices have led me to this life, to this church, with you, where you start to sing and I start to cry, because I love you so much. My choices have led me to this love and my loved ones and my daily life, and my call is here, and I am grateful for all that is my life. Gratitude. Gratitude is the antidote to the spiritual poison of regret. Gratitude for life here and now grounds us from the fantasy clouds of what if, takes us away from making an idol of our own decisions, and it roots out the spiritual poison of regret. Like the Chinese farmer, we don't know how it's all going to turn out. Maybe this is a good turn, maybe it's bad, but honestly, our only option is here, now. All of those decisions from the past, everything that we've turned down, has made space for the lives that we're living today. And every day we are learning how to pull love out of our losses and build our lives on the bricks of the past. Not because everything happens for a reason, but because love is strong enough for us to keep learning and growing for good, even through shit. May gratitude for all that is our life ground us in the joy of here and now. May it be so.